Every evening, Owen slowed down outside the largest house in his neighborhood, convinced wealth always looked exactly like that. His neighbor, Mason, lived in an ordinary home across the street that hardly anyone ever noticed. They were the same age, worked for different companies, and earned almost identical annual incomes. Whenever expensive cars appeared in driveways, Owen quietly assumed their owners had already solved the money problem. He wasn't jealous. He simply believed visible success must always reflect invisible financial security. Mason never argued with those assumptions because they sounded reasonable to almost everyone around them. Years passed, and Owen spent more time chasing the image of financial success than questioning what success actually meant. Every promotion became another opportunity to look like someone who had finally made it. Meanwhile, Mason measured progress using something nobody could recognize just by looking from the outside. His choices rarely impressed anyone because almost all of their benefits remained completely invisible. Friends praised Owen's lifestyle, while quietly wondering why Mason never seemed interested in upgrading anything. Neither man explained his thinking, allowing everyone else to create their own stories about both lives. Then, an unexpected economic slowdown forced many families to make difficult financial decisions almost overnight. Some beautiful lifestyles suddenly became impossible to maintain once paychecks became uncertain. Others barely changed at all, even though nothing about them had ever looked especially impressive. One afternoon, Owen accidentally discovered that Mason had quietly reached financial independence years earlier. The ordinary house, the ordinary car, and the ordinary routine had hidden an extraordinary reality. Before we continue, welcome to Lyon Invests. This channel isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about questioning the financial beliefs that shape how we earn, spend, save, invest, and build wealth. Because what sounds true about money isn't always the full story. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology and systems behind financial decisions, consider subscribing. One quick note before we continue. I'm not a financial advisor. I simply enjoy researching financial psychology, behavioral economics, and investing. Everything shared here is for educational purposes, to help you think more critically and make more informed financial decisions. Now, let's see what this story is really revealing. Stories like this happen every day because our brains naturally judge what we can see before questioning what we cannot. Maybe you've admired someone's lifestyle without ever asking whether it reflected wealth or simply reflected spending. What makes this story interesting isn't the people involved, but the invisible belief quietly influencing millions of financial decisions. Most people never see another person's balance sheet, investment portfolio, or financial obligations hidden behind everyday appearances. Instead, the brain fills missing information by assuming expensive lifestyles automatically represent lasting financial success. Psychologists call this a mental shortcut because your brain constantly searches for quick answers with limited information. That shortcut saves mental effort, but it also creates surprisingly inaccurate conclusions about money and wealth. Visible success is easy to notice because luxury items quietly advertise themselves every single day. Invisible wealth rarely announces itself because ownership, investments, and financial security usually remain hidden from public view. As a result, appearances become louder than reality, even when reality tells an entirely different story. Behavioral economists have long observed that people often compare visible consumption rather than invisible net worth. This comparison quietly influences spending decisions, career goals, and even personal definitions of financial success. Social comparison isn't new because humans evolved by observing others to understand status and belonging. Thousands of years ago, visible resources often reflected survival, making those observations genuinely useful. Today's financial world works differently because many valuable assets exist where nobody else can easily see them. Retirement accounts, business ownership, investments, and emergency savings rarely appear in everyday conversations. Yet those invisible assets often determine who enjoys long-term financial freedom during difficult economic periods. Imagine two people earning exactly $80,000 every year for 20 years. One focuses on looking financially successful, while the other quietly builds ownership that compounds beyond public attention. From the outside, they may appear similar, but their financial futures slowly separate long before anyone notices. This happens because wealth follows mathematics, while status often follows perception. Your bank account doesn't reward appearances. It responds to consistent financial decisions repeated over many years. Compounding rarely feels exciting because its biggest rewards usually arrive much later than people expect. Human psychology, however, naturally prefers immediate evidence over future possibilities. That's why visible rewards often feel more satisfying than invisible progress. Economists describe this as present bias, where immediate benefits outweigh larger future rewards in our minds. The result is a quiet conflict between what feels rewarding today and what creates freedom tomorrow. Businesses understand this tendency and compete every day to capture your attention through visible symbols of success. Advertisements rarely promise peace of mind. They promise a lifestyle other people will immediately recognize. The more visible something becomes, the easier it is for your brain to confuse it with genuine financial achievement. History repeatedly shows that appearances alone have never been reliable indicators of lasting wealth. During economic downturns, many impressive lifestyles disappear surprisingly quickly because appearances often depend on continuous income. Meanwhile, financial resilience usually remains hidden until uncertainty exposes the difference. That difference isn't luck. It's the result of countless ordinary decisions made long before the crisis arrived. The illusion survives because nobody sees the invisible choices behind someone else's financial life. Once you recognize this pattern, your definition of success begins changing almost automatically. Instead of asking, "What can I afford today?" you begin asking, "What creates freedom tomorrow?" That single question shifts your attention from consumption toward long-term ownership and flexibility. The goal stops being to look financially successful and starts becoming genuinely financially secure. When your definition changes, many decisions that once felt difficult suddenly become much easier. Real financial progress often begins the moment you stop measuring your life against someone else's visible lifestyle. You start noticing that every financial decision carries both an immediate reward and a hidden long-term consequence. The invisible consequence usually matters far more, even though it rarely captures your attention today. This doesn't mean enjoying money is wrong. It means understanding the trade-offs behind every financial choice. The wealthiest decision isn't always the one that looks impressive in the present moment. Sometimes the strongest financial position is completely invisible to everyone except the person living it. That perspective transforms money from a symbol of status into a tool for creating freedom and resilience. You stop asking whether others think you're successful and start asking whether your future self will thank you. The answer rarely depends on appearances, because appearances can be borrowed, rented, or temporarily financed. Lasting financial security, however, is built through choices that continue working long after nobody is watching. Perhaps the greatest financial illusion isn't believing expensive things create wealth, but believing wealth must always look expensive. That belief quietly shapes careers, relationships, purchases, and even the goals people spend decades chasing. Once the illusion breaks, many familiar symbols of success begin to look surprisingly different. You notice that confidence doesn't always wear designer clothes, and security doesn't always drive. Sometimes the strongest financial position is hidden behind an ordinary life that attracts very little attention. Human nature constantly encourages comparison because comparison feels easier than understanding unseen reality. Yet the most important parts of a financial life are usually the parts no stranger will ever notice. Maybe true wealth isn't something you recognize by looking at someone else, but something you quietly build within your own decisions. The next time success catches your attention, pause before assuming you know the entire financial story. Because the greatest financial illusion may not be what people own, but what everyone assumes ownership actually means.